Welcome to the Modern Hippie Podcast, where we'll be exploring all of my favorite boundary-pushing people and topics surrounding consciousness, psychedelics, mental performance, functional medicine, living in alignment, and so much more. I'm your host, Barrett Perlman, a former pro wakeboarder turned body worker, energy healer, and well, a modern hippie. And I'm so glad you're here. Are you struggling to integrate your plant medicine or psychedelic experiences? Do you feel alone in your journey towards healing and self-discovery? It's time to discover the Sacred Integration Tribe. Our online membership community is dedicated to bringing people together to share their experiences and support one another on their healing journey. With access to a wide range of resources, including weekly expert guidance on live integration calls with me, Barrett Perlman, guest hosts, integration materials released monthly, and heart-centered peer support, you can finally find the tribe you've been searching for. Join Sacred Integration Tribe today at www.sacredintegrationtribe.com and discover the power of community on your path towards healing and personal growth. Again, that's sacredintegrationtribe.com. Welcome back to the Modern Hippie Podcast. I am joined today by Alex Ruiz, who is a visual alchemist and the man, the myth, the legend behind Aubrey Marcus's podcast cover, Joe Dispenza's Breathwork album cover, Inspire, soon to be another one. You are just this phenomenal spiritual artist and so much more than that. But thank you so much for joining me today.
So good to be here, Barrett. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you and I met on Instagram.
We did, on a live.
Yeah, this is a totally creepy story, but I'm going to own it because I had been following you for like a year. Actually, I look back on my records of like who I wanted on my podcast. And when I find the depths of like what I haven't looked at in a while, you're actually in there in like the top 10 or 15 people. But I saw you on a live and I was like, oh my God, who is this guy? Who is this person talking? And we started talking and I was like, would you interview on the podcast? And you're like, yeah.
Yes. And here we are.
But so much more than that. You're my boyfriend now.
I am.
So I was a total creeper. And I'll own this whole story that, we talked about doing this podcast interview, but then we talked about doing so much more with plant medicines and art and psychedelics and art. And then I kind of just like woke up the next day and I was like, I have to meet this guy now. And I asked you if you would take me to buy art supplies.
That was the hook. Yeah, I couldn't say no to that. So we did it.
And we'd been hanging out. And so that was like, I jumped in on your live on like a Tuesday. I think by Sunday I was driving up to LA to go meet you, to go buy art supplies and have coffee. And then we just never stopped hanging out.
That's right. Wow. Amazing.
Yeah. So, well, I'm glad to finally have you on the podcast because that's been a few months in the making now. And I am so excited to share with my listeners like your story, your journey, because you used to also work in the entertainment industry before you were like, nah, fuck this, not rewarding, not fulfilling. So can you tell me your origin story?
It goes back to 1875 when we were, no.
You're a vampire.
I was born in Mexico, and when I was about 3 years old, came up to Los Angeles and had always been drawing since that age of around 3 years old. Don't know why I started drawing, but I was always encouraged to keep drawing. And so I just kept drawing, and the love for it grew and grew and grew, and never really had any formal training. By the time I was in high school, I applied to art college, in which case I was rejected. And I love telling that story because there's a misconception that people have with artists or people that are naturally talented, which I think there's a lot of BS in that. it's skill that appears to be talent. So I just wanted it really bad. So after getting rejected, which broke my heart as a 17-year-old kid, I found another way to get inside of a training program that allowed me to develop my drawing skills enough to get onto The Simpsons. So it was my first big break. If you don't know what The Simpsons is, my God, I don't know what to tell you. But I stayed on the show for about 8.5 years until I realized I can't stay on The Simpsons. And so I was very grateful, and it was my entire livelihood, and my family had become The Simpsons animators. And eventually I wanted to do more serious artwork, and specifically more monsters, and like, that's serious. Yes, for me it was very serious to like get into creatures and environment and spaceships and Star Wars stuff. And I had no idea, like, where do I go? What's that even called? So that set me off on another journey of, I always say it's like learning to walk again. Because on The Simpsons, I was a big fish, small pond. And then I jump out of that into the frying pan of the entertainment industry, and really was humbled by how much I had to relearn or learn from scratch. And so that took another 5 or so years to get good enough to become a conceptual artist in the entertainment industry, working on Beauty and the Beast and Spider-Man and Avengers and Fast and Furious and just a bunch more movies. And then after 10 years, I realized I'm in the same situation where it's like, I'm working on other people's stuff. How can I get back to working on my own stuff and actually get paid for it? So the past few years has been another learning process of starting over, making new relationships, and creating a whole new style of visionary artwork that many people label it as that. I don't call myself a visionary artist. I think it's maybe a bit too lofty, but I don't care if people call me that.
I'll call you that.
Yes, or visual alchemist, or visual, something with visions and alchemy and visionary and all that. Like, for me, it's just a massive playground that I get to play with these different art styles. So when people ask me what I do, I say I'm an explorer, and what I bring back are the visual representations of the exploration, no matter where the exploration is. It could be realistic, it could be cartoony, and everything in between. So that's the world I play in now, and now offering my services as an art and creative coach to people that want to learn how to do the stuff that I'm doing. Is very teachable, and I love seeing people engage in their authentic creativity. So that's what I'm embarking on now.
It's incredible, because since we met, that was like what we did on our first date. You were like, now that you bought all these art supplies, would you like an art lesson? And I was like, yes. Yes, I would. Please keep hanging out with me. And you started to unlock these depths of me that I had really put at bay. I mean, throughout my whole life, like, I've always kind of painted, but I've been so scared to fuck shit up that I don't really paint. I've been a storyteller through video and visual storytelling. But I've just gotten lost with the art of like really being a kid and coloring, using colored pencils, using pastels, getting my hands dirty and having it be okay. And even just in that like first art lesson, I was like, holy shit, there's an aspect of me that's now being opened up by the permission you've given me to put color to paper. And one of my favorite things that you taught me was just how to get so unattached to what you put down. And part of that is like the actual materials that you're using. So pastels and charcoal, as you taught me, are real. They're erasable in a way that colored pencils and crayons are not. And so it's like you would have me put marks down on a paper, and then I'd take my hand and I'd just smear it all. And I'd be like, I kind of like that. You're like, doesn't matter, fuck it up. And then it's like, God, and then you're doing it over, and you end up making so many different layers on top of layers. And I've seen you make a whole, we were watching a surf contest the other day, and you wanted to draw a surfer, and you probably put like 30 minutes into this surfer on paper. And then you were just literally like, I don't like this at all. And took your hand and just like smudged the whole thing out and drew something else entirely on top of it. And I was just like mind blown and boggled and enthralled and impressed and curious and excited about this new ability, this new way of approaching art that I had never considered before, of like, you can just start with like an Etch-a-Sketch, shake it, start over again. So I think that's a really powerful tool that you bring to people who have lost their touch with their art. But also I've gotten to witness you draw everything from the gnarliest, creepiest monsters who you also believe have the biggest hearts. And to like, I've seen you draw my backyard in just like a, quick 2-minute little sketch that just looks incredible. So the vastness of what you are capable of drawing is also just incredibly impressive, and it oozes mastery. And how are you going to be sharing that with people?
Well, going back to that part of being unattached to the process and being unattached to any particular skill level. A lot of times when people sit down and draw with me, they're like, I can't draw because you're fucking so good. I'm like, mine is shit. I'm like, that's the point. It's shit. Why would you, if you're learning how to golf, why would you compare yourself to Tiger Woods in the first week or 2 or fucking year, right?
Yeah. I'm going to interject really quick. Yes. And that I did say that after our first time drawing together. I was like, shit, like, I don't want to, you're so good at drawing faces that I was like, okay, I'm never going to draw faces again. And I'm going to get really good at like drawing mushrooms and drawing animals.
Yes. I slay mushrooms and animals also, just by the way.
I'm going to be amazing at it.
Yes.
But
yes,
you have helped me hone, like coming back to it. But yes, there's an intimidating factor about drawing alongside you.
Yeah. So some of the exercises I like to begin with people who have that intimidation is to start creating with their non-dominant hand. So if you're right-handed, I say, okay, let's pick it up and we'll do it together, because I am not good with my left hand, not at all. So we're kind of leveling the playing field. And then to even push that further, it's like, okay, let's get a pencil in our toes and we're going to draw with our feet. And that is very difficult. That levels the playing field. And then one step further is, okay, we're going to close our eyes, put a blindfold on, and then draw. Make marks on a page. Then we take it off. We look at it. And we're like, oh, I had no idea this was happening. So it's this beautiful exploration, like going into a dark cave and, taking pictures on a wall that maybe there's some cave art on, and you just don't know what you're going to get. And that is so liberating, so freeing. And people have revelations when they come out of this and seeing what they've created with their foot or non-dominant hand or in the dark. And it inspires them. And then they're like, oh, I can recreate this now, like intentionally, and I can build on it and build and build and build. And then it will become their own unique, authentic style, which I help people cultivate that as well.
Well, another thing I love about your art and your style is you love to mix mediums.
Yes.
And most impressively, like if you haven't seen Alex's art yet, check it out. It'll be all linked up in the show notes. But if you have, you know exactly what I'm talking about, in that you mix in all of these beautiful symbols. You're always cross-pollinating a piece of art amongst different, if it's digital art, you're putting it through 2 or 3 different programs before you're done with it. Or I've also seen you take a chalk and pastel on a piece of paper, take a picture of it, then bring it into Procreate and Adobe and do more to it. So like you just get this final product that's absolutely cannot be recreated. And that's, your process is fascinating to me. Tell me how you got into bringing a piece of art into so many different modalities.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. Going back to the Simpsons, that's all we did was draw on paper. So it was just pencil and paper. There was weren't even computers back then. This is before cell phones. Can you believe that? Before cell phones. And so we were just drawing on paper, and it was a beautiful experience. It was uncomplicated. But then I started seeing these other artists doing digital painting. I'm like, what does that even mean, digital painting? Oh, you can like draw on a tablet and it shows up on the screen? Like, what the fuck is that? Like, so that I was seeing other people's processes, and I'm like, I need to learn that. And that became very humbling. It's like, oh, I need a computer. I didn't even have a computer. And it's like, you need this thing called Photoshop, which I heard about. I'm like, isn't that just for photos? Like, you can paint in it? What the fuck? And then getting used to the tablet and just learning this whole new thing was just this overwhelming, like, years of like dread. There was like very uncomfortable moments. I'm like, why am I doing this? Oh, because I want to work in movies. I want to draw these monsters that I'm seeing these other artists create digitally. So that all just became this repetition and intensity, which I was just doing every day. I stopped going out. I stopped hanging out with friends. I stopped hanging out with family, and weekends and nights was all about learning this new digital process. So all that to say is that it was quite a journey. It did not come easy. And, but I just kept doing it. I got easier and easier. Now I could just do this stuff with my eyes closed. And then, cross-pollinating the traditional with the digital. And then just exploring as many routes to the final piece as possible is what makes being an artist the most fun for me, and the most explorative and the most playful. And it's like, if you get bored with one, you can jump to another. You get bored with that, you can jump to another. So I have all these different avenues to the final piece of a piece of artwork, and keeping it fun and exciting as much as possible. So the processes are massive, and I'm always looking for new processes of how to create a piece of work. So that in and of itself is a journey and an exploration, something to really lean into.
One thing about your process that I find the most fascinating is the digital brushes that you create. That are they do this thing called hose, which is not like prostitutes, but it's more like a garden hose.
Hose. Yes, garden hose.
And so you actually take the time to create these elaborate brushes that'll have 10 to 20 different images in them, or maybe even more.
Maybe sometimes 40, sometimes 50. Yeah, a lot.
And you'll put things like diamonds and feathers and like all sorts of things in a similar color scheme, and then you'll just take a piece of digital art and just hose it. That is literally the technical term.
Yes.
And it's literally like if someone took a garden hose and just started splashing all of these beautiful things all over it. But like, you took the time to create it. Literally no one else can recreate what it is that you've done. Yeah.
And so that's a testament to however much work you put into something, and passion, and it's hard work. And oftentimes it's like, why am I doing this? You're halfway through it and you're like, oh yeah, because I saw someone else do the work. And well, we can talk about Android Jones a little bit, who was my friend and mentor. But when I was working on The Simpsons, I saw his work and I'm like, how the fuck? Like, in many ways that you're like, how the fuck am I doing this? Like, for me, and this was like brand new back then. It was this guy, I just was doing this mind-blowing work. I'm like, how is he doing this? I was like so intimidated. I'm like, I have to learn, but at the same time, like, I'm not like him. I'm not this visionary alchemist. And well, now I am. You are. But we can become these things, children. We can become visionary, whatever we want to do, if we really are excited enough and passionate about. So I saw Android Jones using this image hose brush in 2003. And he was talking about the process of making it, just like you described. And I was like, that sounds like too much work. Like, I don't want to do that. I'll never do that. I just started doing that like 3 years ago. So, almost 20 years later, I'm like, I'm going to make an image hose brush. 20 years later. And then I did, and I'm like, oh, this is super easy. It's like you just create these layers of different pieces of your own artwork. And that's the beauty of it. You're spraying, as it were, new pieces of artwork with your own artwork. And it is incredible. And then you can make image hoses out of those, and you can blend those, and then you bring those into Photoshop and Procreate, and you're getting this beautiful like trifecta of different programs and different abilities within the programs to create something even more unique. You're stacking uniqueness in every part of the process. And the more processes you have, the more unique the piece will be to you.
It's wild to watch. Like, if you guys haven't seen Alex live on Instagram, it's something that used to make me just like jump up and start running around the room being like, fuck, how did it fucking do? Fuck, you just did two things on sides of the image at once. Like, fuck. It's wild to watch you work, and very impressive. And so you mentioned Android Jones. He inspired you. How? Who are your inspirations?
Yeah, so he was the main one. Again, after seeing a few of his pieces online, and so he had created an online community called conceptart.org, and it was just a bunch of concept artists getting together. And again, concept artists are the artists that create art for film and movies and games. By the way, concept art is dead because of AI. So we can talk about AI later.
Yeah, we'll
or
segue there.
That's a whole other fucking podcast. Don't get me riled up on AI. But anyways, it was concept artists getting together, and Android Jones was one of the leaders of the community. And so it was just really great to have somewhat access to him at events and online, even though it was like he was this fucking rock star of a character. And all of these guys, they were like rock stars in the art world. Then I realized, the concept artist is the rock star in the art world. I'm like, I want to be this rock star. I want to do that. But I'm like, all of this, like, well, I work on The Simpsons. I can't like show cartoons. Like, what the fuck? So it's like, I hid the fact that I worked on The Simpsons, and just started creating more figurative stuff, and got really back into anatomy and skeletons and creatures. And that's the stuff I started posting. Still very intimidated because, again, these guys were at such a high level, a level that I've gotten to years ago. So I know the intimidation that other artists have. And all that to say is, again, this can be learned if you really want it bad enough. And that is just something I'm excited to teach people, to learn these advanced techniques. So yeah, Android and a whole slew of these ragtag crew of concept artists who were massive inspirations. And yeah, I mean, I can go on all day about other artist inspirations like Van Gogh, Leonardo da Vinci. Like one of my obsessions is Leonardo da Vinci.
He's great.
Yeah, and that scientists and mathematicians and people today are just so obsessed with this guy. This is the power of creativity through, hundreds of years, and I love that idea that in maybe a few hundred years, people are going to be looking at my drawings and like analyzing them and dissecting. They're going to be able to do I don't know what it's called, where they photograph the drawing and they see past what's on top, like you mentioned earlier. They're like, oh, he started out with the surf drawing and then he ended up with this like quantum fucking fairy, but like we see the surf drawing. So I like
How
the
did
idea.
That get there?
Yeah, that people are going to be able to dissect my work years after I'm gone. And I love that idea because I do it with Leonardo and Van Gogh and Rembrandt. And there's something so powerful and special in appreciating someone's artwork, long after they're gone. So
yeah, the way that you see the world, or the way that you're able to make the best of what you remember from specifically even like plant medicine and psychedelic medicine experiences is mind-blowing, and a talent that you're helping me cultivate now, because I personally feel very much like it's part of my mission in this world to bring forth the information from the depths, to help other people navigate, to help them better understand how to exist in this dimension. But it does bring me to follow-up question of what are your thoughts on AI?
Well, yeah, even since we've met, at first I was like, well, fuck AI. It's not authentic. It's not real. It's not something I want to be involved with. And it was a very emotional, visceral reaction to seeing all of this AI art. And I still feel that way about AI. It's not AI art. It's AI generated imagery. Like artwork is something that an artist creates and crafts along. So, but in the past couple of months, as you know, we've been getting into the AI writing aspect, running our own writing through AI. And so that's a collaborative effect. And I used to think, well, I'm just being hypocritical. I don't like AI art, but I'm okay with AI writing stuff for me. But then I realized, well, we're inputting our own writing and then filtering it through AI. I don't see a lot of artists doing that with their own art. They're not uploading their art and it's giving them variations, although not yet. So I see writing as a way to use AI ethically to enhance my own writing. And so now my philosophy is use AI for things you're not good at. So for me, it was more writing and more like website building. The stuff I either am not good at or don't want to do, I will have AI help with. And the stuff I love, which is art, I'm just going to do it all me. So,
I mean, as you should. You're so good at it.
Thank you.
And so there's a lot of spiritual components in your art, a lot of what showcases a depth of understanding of the greater field that we live in, the greater the greater meaning behind this life. What got you started in pursuing a path of spirituality?
Yeah, that's a great question. If I were to go back to my childhood, I was raised Catholic / Christian. It was kind of a buffet of the two. Not too strict, but it was enough to get me into this idea of, well, there's this entity called God that created all of this, and we need to show some respect and admiration to this God, and this is coming mainly from my father. And really started there. But then, as I got to be a teenager, I'm like, fuck all that. Like, God, what is that? Like, I want to go party and do drugs and have sex and all that, as, most teenagers do, and adults. So I kind of left all that. I pushed it aside. I'm like, there's no room for God in the stuff I want to do. And it wasn't until my mid-20s that I was like, okay, I'm done with all this partying shit. I'm done with drugs. I'm like, I need more spirituality in my life. I need to get clean, and I want to just be more pure. So the idea of getting back into spirituality and religion was a way for me to clean up a lot of things. And then kind of ran through that phase for like 5 years. And then I'm like, okay, I want to go party again. And like, so there's no room for God. And because it was a massive like moral thing. It's like, well, you can't party and like be intimate with people and take certain substances and love God at the same time. You can't do that. And it took me years. Yeah, it took me years to realize, well, you can do that. And so I'm doing that now in life. I've really kind of brought it all back together and explored in the past few years Buddhism, Hinduism, all the other isms, and really kind of made this interesting concoction of different philosophies and belief systems that now really help me just live my life the best I can possibly live it. And now I see, oh, this is the true role of spirituality and religious teachers, is to not necessarily tell other people what to do, but say, well, these certain ways of thinking produce this kind of life. These ways of thinking will produce this, and really testing them out for yourself. So it's a very individual thing. And so, yeah, when I started really bringing that into my artwork, it's probably about 5-6 years ago, when I was at a very dark low, and I was creating a lot of dark characters. There was a while there where I was considered like a dark artist. That was a real term. So, going back to the monsters, and the monsters got scarier that I was creating, and they got darker, but I loved creating them. It was fun for me. And it was only years later I realized I was just kind of echoing what was already going on internally in the form of creatures with horns and like blood and fangs and demonic zombies. And I still love all that shit, like probably even more now, because I understand that's a part of who we are. Like there's a dark side and there's the light side, and we need to integrate the two to become whole individuals. So really diving back into that a few years ago. And again, getting deep into teachings of Ram Dass and Alan Watts and Muji, and then all of the faiths, and then started getting into the idea of like third eye activation, which I thought for years, I'm like, that's a bunch of bullshit. Like these people, these new age people, these hippies, they're doing all this weird shit. But for me, like creating characters like front on with this kind of symbol that's lit in the head was a cool visual. And that was it for me. It was like the forehead is a blank canvas to put stuff on. So why not put a really cool light here or a symbol? And then also have the eyes illuminated, right? And then you have this really focused triangular attention right here in the face. And then the more I started doing that, the more I started getting into like Joe Dispenza around the same time, and then doing his meditations. And
they're so powerful.
Yeah, very powerful. You're focusing on the third eye. And I'm like, well, this is cool. He's saying it's, maybe do it sometime. I don't know. I was like kind of believing it. Other part of me was like, wow, I want to get better. And I heard that meditation and breath work is a great way to do it, but I wasn't seeing results. But I was still creating these characters with the lights. And then eventually over time, I started feeling things here. I'm like, oh my God, like I'm feeling what my characters are feeling. I'm feeling what Joe Dispenza is talking about and all the spiritual teachers about the third eye. I'm like, wait a minute, this is like weird. This is a coincidence. Like I'm not really going through this. So I was even like writing it off. It's like,
goodness.
Yeah, because I'm like, hey, I'm not one of them fucking weirdos, but like I'm interested in the visual components. It was the art that kind of got me into spirituality. And then eventually this started happening all the time. And I mean, it's happening right now where I can just think about this area and it's just lit. It's just lit up. And so it was beautiful that the art got me into spirituality. It felt like I was creating characters that were intensely spiritual beings, only because, colorful and lights and third eye and like just with a look of compassion on their face. And I realized I wanted to connect with compassion like so much. And I was just very isolated and very alone. And I'm like, you're the only thing I got, this creature that I'm looking at for like 6 hours at a time. Like it's just me and you here. And so it became this intense connection with every new character I was creating. And so I would just create sometimes several a day of these feminine characters facing forward. That's something I stole from Android Jones. Well, he said, if you ever are confused, you don't know what to draw, just always remember FFF, female facing forward. And so I just started doing that. I'm like, this is great. I love this. Every face can be uniquely different, just like all of our faces are uniquely different. And I wanted to up level each one. Each new piece had to be at least as good or better or more profound than the last piece. So I just kept challenging myself. This next one is going to be even more transformational. And then like fucking lights and fairies and butterflies and shit just shooting out of the top of the head. And then that started happening to me too, like the Kundalini stuff. I'm like, oh my God, this stuff is happening to me. And now I get to put it back into my art authentically and say, this is really happening to me now. And like, who else is this happening with? And I would hear about other people who were like, oh yeah, I'm going through that too. And your art really helps me to kind of focus in and lock in on this process. And so over the years, I've been hearing from so many people that like my art has transformed them. It has changed their lives in some situations just by looking at something I created. That started getting addicting. And I was like, okay, I'm going to create more of these characters. And so I've created hundreds, I don't know, I haven't counted, but there are probably thousands of sketches here or there, but hundreds of like.
Definitely thousands.
Okay, thousands. Yeah. If you look at my Instagram,
I've seen your boxes.
it goes down.
Some of your boxes.
Yes. So, and, it's funny because since AI has been like this massive thing, And everyone's now being able to upload their photos and then see a beautiful, like transformative version of themselves. That was my business before AI. And this all started happening. That business dried up like fucking crazy. And thankfully, I've been wanting to stop doing that for a little while. It was like this really interesting synchronicity of like the explosion of AI and then my lack of desire to create portraits for people. Because for years I was known as the portrait guy, and I have an insanely long waiting list of people wanting these. But when AI blew up just this past year, a few months ago, like that waiting list, like crickets, like no one goes to the wait. No one wants these anymore because they're like, I could just go to Lenza and make my own badass thing for free or for like $20 rather than pay this guy a few grand to do it. And that was like liberating for me also, because I'm like, oh, I want to create income via other routes, such as coaching and teaching and all that. So it was a beautiful synchronicity, but I look forward to doing portraits again soon.
Oh, I'm so excited because I was on your waiting list in the ethers somewhere to have my portrait done and never heard from you about it, which was like, explains why at the times, you know. And so I did my Lensa portrait, but I'm like, it's like it's not yours. It's fine for now. It captures some essence of my spirit.
Yes. But, and they look great. And by the way, yeah, yours is one of the last portraits in progress now that's being worked on before I take a break. So yeah, no more portraits, fans.
Which I'm so excited about. It will become the new podcast album cover for this podcast, which I think it's so funny that you were making fun of the hippies and now you're on the Modern Hippie podcast. But I too used to make fun of the hippies, and now here I find myself being like, I guess this is what we are, like modern hippies. Yes. And I didn't know that about your journey, that the characters were what you had to relate to that brought you compassion and that helped you grow through looking at them. Like you didn't actually have those people in your life. And I think a lot of us, when we start our healing journey or our spiritual awakening, the people who are in our lives that don't want to walk that same path really quickly tend to fall to the wayside. It becomes really lonely really fast. And then as we sit alone and we do the work, then we start to attract members of our tribe. But there's this like, kind of like with art, there's this ugly phase. And there's this ugly phase of your spiritual awakening, which is really painful and tough to get through. And hopefully a time when people know that that's the greatest time to be bringing in a coach or a mentor of some sort to really help you stand firm in that ground of up-leveling your frequency and knowing that as you change, you really do begin attracting. I mean, no matter what stage you're at, you attract the frequency that you're at. So if you're at that frequency of lack and depression and sadness and the world is all against you, guess what? You kind of keep attracting more of the world being against you. But when you find yourself in that place of giving and that place of gratitude, you tend to, in my experience in the world, operating from that place is a very different one from other people's. Like, I'm consistently stoked and grateful for even just like the valet guy who controls the fence to get out of this place that I have to work every Friday, and they don't validate my parking. And so it's like $20 to get out. And so now he and I have gotten to know each other, and he lets me out every time I see him. And I didn't ask him to do that. He just, volunteered one day, and so grateful for that. And those are just like the little kinds of things that we can find changing in our lives when everything around us begins to change. And where did psychedelics fit into this journey for you?
Yeah, that's a huge one. And so over the past few years, when I started creating more visionary-esque artwork, and people would ask, do you do psychedelics? And it always makes me laugh, because I'm like, let's not assume that everyone who creates this kind of artwork does psychedelics, but more often than not, they do. And so I jokingly always respond, I'm like, what do you think? Like, what do you really think? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, yes, you thought right. Psychedelics have been massively inspiring to my artwork. And I started playing with LSD when I was about 16 years old. And it was just a fun thing. Kids like to have fun, and it was all for fun. But then I remember a few times when I was creating art with it at 16, I'm like, this is the best thing ever. This is so cool. This is like, it's kind of telling me where the lines and patterns can go before I could see the patterns before, and then like trace them off. And I was like, this is so powerful. But it didn't become this massively serious thing because I can only do LSD on the weekends. And well, eventually it like spilled over, and like, I'm going to take LSD at like art class at like 12 p.m. and then it'll last a few hours. I'll sit in the back of the classroom, because my art teacher they didn't really teach. They're like, just go, here's some pencils, just go draw some shit. I'm like, yes. And so I would do that sometimes at school. I'm not recommending that, children listening.
Don't do drugs adults. At school. Do drugs in a safe place.
Yes. So it wasn't until probably like my mid 30s when I started playing with art and psychedelics again intentionally. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to have all my supplies out, and I'm going to create some incredible artwork with the use of whatever medicine I was playing with. And that's kind of when it started. So a little over 10 years ago, I just dove in and I was like, okay, I want this to be like a thing, like a practice. And so I just kept building and building and building. And then eventually it was like, man, LSD a lot of the time, it's a powerful and it's very energy draining. And it wasn't until years later that ketamine kind of found its way in. I'm like, this is interesting. What is this? Going back to mushrooms. Okay, mushrooms, LSD was like similar experiences. But then ketamine became this whole other dimension of like, how do I interpret my experience artistically with ketamine, which is very different. There's nothing there to like hold on to, as it were. There's no structure. There's no pattern recognition like in LSD or psilocybin, where there are distinct patterns and colors that usually frequent the experience pretty much most of the time. Ketamine became this whole new world, and it was like this endless like chasm that I can go and explore in. And then when you start mixing the three together, or four, whatever, even cannabis or peyote or wachuma, it takes on a whole new dimension. So it's an infinite playground of like visual styles and interpretations just waiting to be like discovered and then brought back. So that's how I look at psychedelics now with art, is infinite playground, infinite styles and patterns to go mine and bring back. And it's incredibly exciting to think of being an artist with this tool set of psychedelics.
And it's very cool to watch you in that space as well. I know you're always encouraging me to draw at the same time. And then sometimes you just watch me and I'm like, so this is what it's like to be you. People just want to watch.
Yes.
But what have been some of your favorite ketamine and discoveries? I know like you and I did a really incredible ketamine session last week with your friend Chris and his wife.
Yes.
And that was what did he say as we were coming out of it? He's like, 4 healers get together on a Friday night.
He's like, what'd you do on Friday night? I had beer and watched football. He's like, what did we do? We opened up a fucking portal with 4 of the most like incredible fucking healers in the neighborhood that probably causes some shift in some kind of quantum realm or some shit. Yeah. That's what we did.
We put a rip in the fabric of time, for sure.
Yes.
A beautiful rip, a loving rip, a healing rip.
Yeah, and for me, that was my most powerful ketamine experience, like times 1,000. And I still feel like I am like still in that state from a few days ago, and I'm still integrating the visions now in these new drawings that I'm doing. And it's just incredibly powerful to again think and to translate an experience where really there was no visuals for me in this experience. It was all felt. So it's like, how do you illustrate something that is pure feeling? And so that's a challenge sometimes, because they aren't actual things, but they can be in colors or shapes or certain types of lines, flowy versus straight. And yeah, it's always a puzzle for me, which is what I love about it. It's never set in stone. It's every drawing and every piece is a brand new puzzle that I get to put together. I have all the pieces, or maybe not even all the pieces. I have some pieces, and then I get to put it together. And so that's how I look at drawing also. It's like puzzle making and solving.
Yeah. I love what you told me about your session, which was your ketamine session, which was that you got out the laughter of like 1,000 lifetimes. You never laughed so hard for so long.
Oh my God. Okay. Yes. I'm remembering that. Yes. And I think that even state, that energy of laughter, like there are moments just throughout the day since then where I'm like, I need a fucking laugh like so hard now. So yes, it was like I was laughing for other beings, and all my stored up seriousness like came out in this epic laughter where I could barely breathe, and this just lasted for minutes and minutes. And I'm like, is anyone else? Yeah, is anyone else? Why isn't anyone else laughing? Like, why am I the only one? Like hysterical, like crying, like I couldn't. The pain of the.
But that was your purge to have.
Yes.
That was your purge of the seriousness, the stifledness, the lack of comfort, I think, that you had been feeling. Like when you and I met at the end of January, you were really coming into this feeling of like not feeling grounded.
Yes.
And you didn't feel like you had a home, and you didn't know if you wanted to have a home. You wanted to have this traveling art circus, but then you were also like, the idea of traveling all the time is just like making me nauseous. And so eventually you've sort of found a home here with me in Huntington Beach, or more so the community that's so beautiful here.
Yes.
And I think my interpretation of your purge is that you're finally letting go of that desire for something that you didn't have, that created suffering, because you had been traveling for you'd been living out of a suitcase for how many years now?
I mean, couple
years,
maybe. Yeah.
And so you finally feel safe here. You feel comfortable here. Like we finally found the flow with our relationship that feels really good. And then you're in this space with your brother, like, and that you've known so well. And then you were able to really unlock and feel that safety. And because you were safe, then you could feel more play.
Yes.
And you got my favorite kind of purge, which is laughter.
Yes. Oh my God. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah. How do you like to use ketamine usually you have told me it is your favorite tool.
Yeah, as of now, it's definitely my favorite for not only creating art, but also just exploring the different facets of the mind and the psyche and all of that, and so much more beyond. I feel like I'm at the top of this iceberg that represents the ketamine experience, and like there's this whole other world to be explored, and just being mindful of my own potential addiction to this drug. And it is, for me, it's addictive. And I've heard other people say it's not addicted. And for me, it is. So I just need to be careful to do stints at a time. Because if it was always around, I would always do it. And that's not good with anything. Like with LSD or mushrooms, I don't always want to do those things. And but something about ketamine, the short-term effects can be short-lasting, so you can do it more and throughout the day and even closer to bedtime. But again, like doing this long-term is not wise. So I'm glad I am personally out, and I have you as an accountability person because, well, you have some, and the only way I can get it is to you. And you're going to be like, motherfucker, like, no, you can't have this shit.
And he doesn't know where it's hidden.
I don't know. Not yet. So yeah, being careful with these things is so important. And once we get to that place of like, hey, I feel like I'm addicted, I'm a drug addict, and really sitting with that, and then that becoming its own therapeutic journey in which art is a way to help me work through that. And then writing, of course, like even just journaling about, okay, what is it about ketamine that I love so much? And it's a massive like form of escapism, just like any other drug or food or sex or anything like that. Yeah. So really exploring these things of like, I don't want to need this thing to feel great and to make amazing pieces of art. And so thankfully I don't have withdrawal. If it's gone, it's gone. I'm like liberated. I'm like, okay, I don't want to see it for another while. And then eventually the urge comes like, okay, I feel like I'm ready to engage in another stint of ketamine and art. And even talking about this with people on the lives and just friend groups, and the desire for people to want to do ketamine and art specifically is way bigger than I thought. And you've been noticing that too. There's people that are interested in combining these two modalities of exploration. And so now thinking about what does that look like as far as like workshops or events, and then dealing with the legality of it and all that stuff is something that I'm excited to work with you on, into formulating these ketamine and art sessions.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, it's coming through the pipeline. And I think you raise a really good, interesting concern about ketamine, that there is like a small segment of the population that does find it addictive. I've met a couple other people who have as well, and have had some serious consequences because of it. For me, what I noticed is that I really like to do big doses of it. And when you do big doses of it, the next, like that night, you're like, put that as far away as possible. Like the come down's a little rough. And I find, there's a lot to digest from those big ones like we had the other last Friday. But in the smaller ones, it's more like taking almost like a little MDMA hit, or, you said, you get to disassociate from whatever's bothering you. And so you get to do a little bit, and before, it lasts for maybe in little bits. It really lasts for about 45 minutes at a bump. And so you've taken a few, and then the next day you're like, oh, well, that felt good. I'll take it. And then it's next thing like your whole gram is gone in like a few days.
Yes.
And you're like, well, I'd like more because that felt great. But to have that self-reflection of what is it that you're running away from. I really enjoyed having ketamine as another tool in my toolbox. And the way that I know how to use ketamine is that if I am having a meltdown about something, so for me in the past when I've used ketamine a lot as a tool, would be like if I was dating someone and things started to go astray, and my mind just, they weren't this working on themselves human. My mind would be running astray and feeling all of that anxious attachment. And so I could do a little baby bump of ketamine and immediately disassociate and bring myself back to the things that I needed to accomplish in my day, like go to work or get ready to go to work or walk the dog, things that I had to actually get out of bed for. Because I'm no stranger to having been so depressed or knocked off my game by just a simple relationship conflict that I couldn't get out of bed. And so for me, it was that little tool. And then I'd use it for maybe 3 or 4 days like that. And then I'd be like, okay, now I'm running. Now I'm running from not facing that problem. But it was what I needed to help me function until I could get to the place of being able to confront it, which is wise to have that idea that, you can put the Band-Aid on it, but if you're still bleeding out, you eventually need to figure out how to sew that up and heal. And so shortening that timeline on using the tool, especially when it's a medicinal tool, and then doing the healing work.
I love that.
Yeah. Because I think ketamine is a really beautiful tool, and not just in the little bit disassociated parts, but I am really studying my experiences with it. And I keep going back, trying to understand more and more. And I finally am finding community around other people who use ketamine to explore. And I'm really discovering that when mixed with an intelligent plant medicine, now the plant medicine takes that tool and begins to wield it. And it was really Aubrey Marcus who got me a lot thinking about, because he's so emphatic about combining cannabis and ketamine. And I had some really incredible mushroom and ketamine experiences. And what I noticed happened was that when the mushrooms got a hold of the ketamine, I would get these incredible downloads of my own body and the energy systems going on inside me. And I could communicate with my own systems to fix broken programming and heal things and flush things out. And that's like the only way I know how to explain it, is that when these other intelligences get a hold of the ketamine, I get really important lessons.
Right.
Whereas when I use ketamine by itself, I go and explore as consciousness. But they're both really powerful ways. And
indeed.
yeah, that big session we had the other night for me was this giant ride of just sweet surrender.
Yes.
And feeling so safe where we were, so that I could just relax and enjoy this medicine that was served to me in a very intentional, conscious, cared for setting. And it was one of the most healing journeys I've ever had on ketamine.
Yeah, me too.
Where we got to this space where we were all almost like giants in this giant like desert world, with a giant river running through it. And these other beings were there who were just kind of like helping cloak us and care for us and letting us know that everything's great. And we moved on. And then what I've noticed now for the second time is that something that was going on for you infiltrated my visions. And in particular, you were thinking that you were starting to maybe not be doing so well. And you started calling on other people intentionally that would come and make you feel more secure and safe in what you were going through. And so I remember being in mine, and this is all happening. And then all of a sudden, like Jesse Elder's there. And I'm like, Jesse Elder's a self-help coach. He's a phenomenal human. And you're in his program right now, learning from him. So I've been sort of learning of him through you. And I was like, what is Jesse Elder doing here? This is so weird. And then the next thing I know, Aubrey Marcus is there, whom you're also friends with. And I was like, what is Aubrey Marcus do? Like, I really didn't have these people on the brain right now. I don't, oftentimes what you're exposed to throughout the day, I notice kind of shows up in a ketamine journey. And I was like, I don't remember thinking about the so interesting.
Yeah.
And then they went away. And then you later told me that you called on Jesse and you called on Aubrey.
Yeah.
And this is the second time now that you and I have had like cross infiltrating. What you were doing came in.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
I love it. Amazing.
What was that like for you to feel like you were starting to lose control in that space? Because that was your biggest dose.
Oh, yeah. And I had no idea it was going to be that big. Like that was full on ceremony. As you know, we went there to partake in ketamine and then to work with our friend Chris, who's going to start channeling. And we have this fun thing we do. And I was turning into more of like, this is a thing where it's like we take ketamine and Chris channels his guides and really just gives us these beautiful messages and outlooks and insights on life and everything in life. It's this beautiful exercise that we do. And so on Friday, when we just dropped in and I thought, okay, I want to be able to like draw and like,
there's no drawing on that dose.
And it kicked in fast, like under 5 minutes. Like we were like on the floor, like we were gone.
Which I usually lay down when I take my ketamine because I like to K-hole. So I was like very prepared and very comfortable. Like, okay, well, he said we're K-holing, so we're K-holing.
This was a K-chasm, ketamine quantum chasm that was just blew me away. And I'm like, and then the thoughts of my previous, K-hole experiences were not great. They're terrifying for me. So I associate terror with going too deep into specifically a ketamine chasm where it's like, you lose all sense of reality and you question the nature of reality. And they've been very dark for me in the past. So I just felt like, oh no, I don't want to go into this. And I'm like, so I grab your hand because you're next to me and I'm like, I know I'm safe here. I know Chris and Shirley are here, Barrett's here, we're safe. But I was like, oh no, like what if I freak out? And I thought, well, they'll take care of me, but they're so fucking gone.
You
like,
literally had two facilitators in the room.
Yes, who are also as deep into the medicine. So it's like, oh fuck, if I freak out, they might be too gone. But I knew that if I had something to hold on to, and I feel that is a massive part to any harrowing psychedelic experience, is that there's nothing to hold on to. You're just gone mentally and spiritually and emotionally. There's nothing to grab onto. So literally having a person there you can hold, I was like, oh, this helps. And then I'm like, oh, I'm going to start calling in. Like, and I remember Aubrey Marcus saying something like this a while back, where he's like, when you're having a difficult time, you announce yourself in the experience. And you say, I am, Art Warlock, Alex Ruiz is here with my staff of like whatever. And it's like, and I'm here with my crew, right? I'm here with my team. And so I didn't do the announcement because I'm like, I just need help, Jesse. And I just see Jesse's face and he's smiling, he's laughing. He's like, I'm here with you, brother. I'm here with you. And the same with Aubrey. He's like, I'm right here. We're right here, brother. Let's go for this ride. Let's go in. Then they start smiling and laughing. And I start smiling and laughing. And then it's just, this beautiful experience. So it was a great lesson to call on the people and the things you love into your journeys when you're having a difficult time.
Absolutely. And those people that you love are happy to lend their energy to you in that space. I had my most challenging plant medicine journey yet was my first one in Peru in September with a medicine man who was guiding my tour. And he just gave me this blast off dosage of ayahuasca when I had yet to figure out how to break through on DMT. And I sat in this really uncomfortable space the entire time. My skin was crawling, I was shaking, and I couldn't push through. And I was calling on everybody and everything. And the one thing that worked the most for me was called on my Bufo facilitator. And he has these real deep eyes, and he's this big, wonderful human who's just as calming and grounding. And he came and sat with me and kind of like you said, just like locks eyes and is like, it's going to be okay. And so I think that's great advice to anyone who may find themselves in a challenging situation, like call upon whoever it is that makes you feel the most safe.
Yes.
And their energy will show up and guide you through that next phase if there's no one in the room with you to actually help you do that.
Yes.
Yeah. So when are you doing your next one?
Well, yeah. Well, again, being the slippery slope that it is for me. If you were like today, do you want to do another ketamine infusion? I'd be like, okay, I'll take some stuff on my calendar. Let's go. So yeah, I just want to put in a little space, integrate it.
Yes.
Which I'm doing with this art, and I'm doing it on Instagram Lives, which in the beginning it was a bit of resistance. Like, I don't want to talk about, ketamine and I don't want to inspire people, say too much, but at this point I'm just telling my story and how I'm integrating the experience through art. And people are very interested in ketamine and art. So I'm going to lean into that. Probably do another live today or tomorrow where I talk about ketamine and art integration. And yeah.
Well, which is also so beautiful because in May, you will be my first guest hosting with me in the Sacred Integration Tribe. Which is launching any day now, if it hasn't already launched by the time this podcast actually comes out. If you haven't already, join the waitlist and get in on that. But I will be hosting weekly live integration calls, and each month having a different guest facilitator. And you are the first one.
Yes.
So
looking forward to it.
Facilitating through art and all that beautiful, beautiful integration space, plant medicine space. Yeah, well, this has been such an incredible journey with you, and psychedelics have been a big foundation of our relationship. And I think that's so powerful. I read a book called Becoming by Azria and Benjamin Becker, who then when I found out it was on your reading list, I got you a copy. And so you read it then too. And what I love about that book was that they really describe how they came together and they started essentially quantum dating, which was coming together and seeing sort of this whole timeline potential for them in the future and just saying yes. And because they were both owning everything about them in the deepest parts of their authenticity, they could show up and continue to make fuck yes answers and also tell each other where their no's were. And then utilize psychedelics and plant medicines to help them deepen their relationship. And I finished reading that book back in October. And I remember feeling like, okay, wait, they did it. It's possible. And it opened my doors to receiving that someday. I was like, it's got to be possible. If it was possible for them, it's possible for me. And then that's kind of what you and I did as well. Like we met and we started quantum speed dating. I think literally within a month you came to live with me, which is temporarily. I'm using air quotation marks for those of you who can't see. You'll eventually find your own place.
Yes, we're big on our own spaces, which is great. It's great to be able to be comfortable in needing and telling your partner that you need space. And if that means you having your own space, if not your own room, that can do wonders in a relationship, right?
Yeah. And so I'm curious, what in all of that for you were some of the hardest lessons? What were like our biggest humps so far?
Well, yeah. So going back to like the personal space it's just so important for me. I've always been very lone wolf type. So I've always had my own space. And even in relationships, there was always like an office or something to kind of go and hide in, that, a place that I was primarily the main rent payer. So I'm like, oh, this is my space and you're living here. And so coming here with you is like, well, I treated this like this is your space and I'm living with you. Like you are giving me the honor of staying in your space. So I'm like being very mindful, and it's been humbling in that way, because the part of me, it's like, just go out and get your own goddamn space, but again, leaning into this of how special our relationship is. And I'm like, no, but this is actually the work that I need to do to really engage with a partner, is to deal with stuff as it comes up. And so that's how we've been dealing with issues that have been coming up, is that we say, hey, do you have a minute? Can we just talk about something real quick? Or let's schedule something for the end of the day where we get together and talk. And so not a day goes by where we don't really talk about what's bothering us, not necessarily about one another, but about life. And it's been amazing work, and it's showing the results in our own lives and how we deal with other people as well. So the main lesson is not running away from problems like I used to in the past. I would always avoid, detach from other partners if I didn't like what was going on. That builds resentment, that builds animosity, and eventually the relationship is falling apart, and you're like, why isn't it working out? Because two people are not dealing with the shit. So we deal with the shit here, and it's been incredibly fulfilling and challenging at times. But like you said earlier, we've gotten into this flow of how we interact in a relatively small space, and then thinking potentially for the future where we have our own rooms and our own bedrooms and our own houses, separate houses that are next to each other, which we both love that idea. But that's us. Yeah. We love that idea.
We work up to that.
Yes, work up. So if we can do it in this space and have it be successful, imagine in a larger space with even more personal freedom to then come back together and join and grow and become stronger with one another.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And one of the reasons I love that separate house idea is because it forces us to love each other enough, to desire each other enough, to continually choose each other enough that we come together
Yes.
most nights.
Right.
Or not. And then we can still go to our separate spaces and like have that depth of freedom while still being committed.
Yes.
And I think that's really beautiful. And like you're a really light sleeper and I'm a really heavy sleeper. But I also move a ton at night. And so I know it keeps you up. And so just even that idea of like right now, we finally figured out sleeping in separate rooms. And it's working really well. And so we cuddle and then we go off and we get our good sleep.
Yes.
Because it's one of the most important things you can do.
My God, yes. Yes.
But I also love how you know, I knew this before about relationships, that they're this mirror for all of your shadows. But you very quickly came into the picture and just immediately illuminated the one thing that I did not want to face at all, which was my toxic scheduling. And I'm so glad that you did, because for starters, nothing usually makes me really desire to change more than love and potentially losing it, or potentially having it. So yeah, you came in and you were just like, literally, hey, you're toxic scheduling and the amount at which you desire to work each day and not have time for us. And this is like, it doesn't work for me. And I was like, what? I'm trying to be this entrepreneur here and I'm trying to launch this other thing to help me stay afloat right now. And like, you're like, cool, I love that for you. And this doesn't work for me. And so I really got to also sit with like how challenging that must be for people in relationships who live together, who don't have the communication that we do, because like I wanted to go in my bedroom and cry for like 2 or 3 days. And I didn't even feel comfortable going in my bedroom and crying because you were here. And I was like, he's going to hear me. Like, I just want to cry by myself. Like, and he can't. And it gave me some insight into what masks some couples must find themselves wearing by having had this fight. And now they have to be around each other. And, you know, you had this one great realization one night when we were doing art on the floor that like our energy was wonky and you were trying to make me sort of feel better, but you also didn't really want to try that hard. And so I was sitting here feeling shitty. And so you were acting shitty. And then you were like, wait a second, like, we stop the art.
Stop it. Stop the train. Let's
talk about this, because like, okay, I realize I'm sitting here making it worse. And then you open the doorway for me to have the realization that by me sitting in the depth of my own feelings, I wasn't doing anything to help the group situation. And just, we've learned some really important lessons together in such a short amount of time.
Yes.
And, I've never been in a conscious relationship before.
Yeah, me neither.
And it's cool. And I've mentioned someone on this podcast before who I dated, you know, about a year ago. His name was Nick, and he was very somewhat conscious, and he was the first person who showed up and held space for me to be loved and seen in all of my emotions. But Nick never, you know, we never were in a relationship really. It was like a real stressful like month or two of us figuring it out and then not figuring it out. But the lessons he showed me and the friendship he's given me since have been beautiful. And so to really be in this with you, where we're committed, and you know, we're not operating from a place of I desire not to lose you, but I desire to know my fuck yeses, and I hope that in my fuck yeses you continue to choose me and I continue to choose you.
Yes.
And the consciousness of that alone, that it's potentially impermanent, and it's only ours as long as we want to work on making it ours. There's been a lot there, and to get out of the discomfort of talking about things as they're happening, and to instead find comfort. Because I think for me it was like getting through the first like 2 or 3 conversations of having them like right then and there, where I would find myself kind of almost like trauma response, deer in the headlights, like immediately frozen because this is where everything in the past has gone wrong for me. And then someone leaves and now I'm like, how did I get here? But instead to discover how to breathe through that, to overcome the trauma response, and to engage with you. And through engaging with you, it was realizing that because we were doing it so soon, that there was plenty of room for growth in any direction. It wasn't like, what you're doing doesn't work for me, and I am now breaking up with you. I remember you did say, like, I would be shocked if you could manage to meet me at where I want to be at, but you're like, I'm open to allowing you to try. And I did. And the adjustments I made for me really mostly work for you now. I'm still struggling with toxic scheduling a little bit, but I think I'm much better.
Yeah, we all have our own things that we, because my going back to my, I don't want to call it a ketamine addiction, but we just say that could easily derail something, and that's something I need to work on, and letting you know that I have this problem, and so you are accountability, and that definitely really helps. It's still a struggle at times, but it definitely helps to have someone else there who understands and knows what the other is going through. Absolutely.
I look forward to so many more lessons with you. Here's Apollo dropping in for his cameo.
Yeah,
as he
just the camera.
Apollo is my dog, my 14-year-old dog son. And he just, you ever hear that jingling in the background or the nails clicking on the floor? That's him dropping in to say hi. But, this has been such a fantastic conversation with you.
Yes.
Where can my audience keep up with you and to jump in on your programs?
Yeah. So my art is on alexruiz.art. And my coaching program is infiniteartist.net. So they can go and sign up for either monthly group coaching or one-on-one coaching, whatever suits their needs.
Awesome. And where online do you like to hang out the most?
Instagram. I'm doing lives there almost, every other day or something. I post there a lot. So yeah, you can find me on Instagram, alexruiz.artist.
And I jump in on quite a few of his lives. So
yes, you're a great moderator.
Thank you.
Yes, co-pilot, conspirator.
Well, thank you so much for this. I look forward to having many more conversations with you.
We shall.
Yes. And thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'll see you soon. See you tonight.
Ooh.
Oh.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and review this podcast wherever you're listening. I'm so grateful to have you on this journey with me. Until next time.